The entity picker has also had a bit of an overhaul in this release too. There's more context has been added, including the area and device where the entity is from. The entity ID, though, has now is no longer being shown in that picker, but there is a setting in the user preferences where you can display the entity ID back in the picker.
We've been
So
working on this one for a long time. I think 2 years ago, we allowed to provide better context. It used to be that every entity was named device name and an entity name. And we realized that we actually couldn't show the entity name individually anywhere because we didn't know if the device name could be split up. You would rename the device, your entities wouldn't be renamed, it would be almost out of whack. And so 2 years ago, we started to allow integrations to specify this is the entity name, including entity name translations, because then all of a sudden, if it's the temperature, well, it could be translated into your language. The device name separate. And so now this entity picker, it is a bit bigger row per entity. And we had such long discussions, right? So now we're showing you the area and the device, maybe even the floor. I'm not 100% sure. But we also show you the domain. So if there's two entities named the same thing, like your media player is just called living room, for example. Now on the right, you see media player. And then you toggle that box, the row gets even a bit taller, but we also put the entity ID. But you can actually still search on the entity ID. So if you know your entity IDs, and then it's all fine. I think also we would love to be in a future where you don't have to know your entity IDs to select the right thing. And this context should make that possible.
I would so as of, let's call it as of this release, Paulus, if I was a brand new user and I just plugged in a green or whatever and said, hey, it's my first crack at Home Assistant, what would you do from a naming perspective as you add devices? Would you do anything, or would you just say,
I'm starting to name devices. Used to be like called my AC living room AC, for example. And now I'm starting to call them just AC because I see whenever I look at a device which room they are in. And so I'm not 100% sure if every place that is already correct and working. But for example, we've tried really hard now that if you set up a new device and we ask you, you used to be like, oh, you set up Philips Hue. Here's like 6 Philips Hue devices that got added. Pick the area. Now, actually, we allow you to also change the name, and it will also change the entity IDs right away. So we assume that everybody will have the right names and entity IDs kind of from the get-go for new users, right? Existing users is just a hot mess because we add these things over time, and every time the newer stuff gets added. But I think that if I were a new user today, I wouldn't worry about anything really and just kind of go with the flow, rename as possible.
Yeah. Okay.
Or as needed, I have to say, yeah.